Welcome to Brick by Brick, Building Wealth Through Homeownership. I am Kim Von Dohren, your Realtor.
And I'm your banker, Ed Marko. So we're going to do a short episode on investing.
Yes.
We'll come back to this way in depth at a later date, or maybe all the different kinds of investing. But I think today we're just going to touch on investing, what it's like to do it, how to get started if you're going to get started, what you can expect as you're going through it.
And our own personal experiences around it.
Absolutely, yeah. So first off, you still have investment property. You're still a landlord. What drew you to doing that? What do you find that you like about it, and maybe what don't you like about it?
The real estate industry and property is something I'm attracted to naturally. That's just, I love, one of the things I really love is a before and after. Like I love a makeover,
right?
Whether it's a house or a person, I love a makeover. And so I think both my attraction to real estate and then the possibility of taking something that looks like a mess and turning it into something wonderful. And you can do that as a flip, or of course you can do that as a buy and hold, as we call it, meaning I bought the property, I fixed it up, and I'm holding on to it as a rental property. And so something I'm very good at is seeing the possibility. When I walk into a property and it looks a shambles and it smells, that scares people. I've taken people into properties like that, bank owns especially, which is typically how investors used to buy properties, was the bank owns back in the day. But that's really what attracted me to doing it. Plus, I know you can make money doing it. And I've listened to many people tell the horror stories. Everybody's got their horror stories about being a landlord and bad tenants. And I can tell you some because I know people who've had those experiences. I've been very fortunate and very blessed. And I believe there's a reason for that. It's not all luck. And I'll talk about a little bit about that in this conversation. But overall, it's the attractions to the real estate industry to begin with, and then the before and after, and then the possibility of it creating passive income, mostly passive income. That's why.
The landlord side of it, you like that cash flow.
Yeah.
For the lot of work up front to have long-term regular gains.
Income. Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
So not so much flipping. You like being a landlord.
Right. So there are many flippers out there, but in order to be a good flipper, you really have to either have a contractor who's working for you at cost, or you have to do it yourself. And we aren't those people. I always say my husband's great at deconstruct, but the construct part's not his jam. So we always have to hire help. Well, that puts you at a financial disadvantage when you're competing to buy a property. And it's gotten way more competitive in the investment business, in the fix and flip. It's super competitive because everybody's a fixer, upper flipper person now. So that's not really something we do. So we mostly do buy and holds.
Right.
We actually haven't done any flips. Everything we've bought, we've held.
Right. So the buy and hold part of it, that's what always fascinated me about it. That's what I love about real estate. But like we said in, I think, our second or third episode, how do you make money in real estate? Holding it.
Right.
Real estate goes up in value. So our thought process was always, it's good to own it, especially if you don't owe anything on it. It's just there going up in value.
Right.
And that creates wealth. And you don't have to pay any tax on that while it's growing because you haven't pulled it out yet.
Right.
So it's better than money in the bank. I think it's better than the stock market. It's my favorite kind of investment because it's there, it's growing, and it's not costing you anything really other than property taxes and maybe some homeowners insurance. And if you've got tenants, they're paying the mortgage, they're paying the property tax, they're paying through the rent, they're paying for everything while that house is going up in value. If it can cash flow, even better. You've got a cash flow and your property is still going up in value. That's what we always found attractive to it.
Right.
But we were not afraid to flip. We would buy a townhouse, just a regular, townhouse in the area that was kind of sad. It wasn't like it was a decrepit thing. We weren't that handy, but we can put in floors, we can put in cabinets, we can put in countertops, we can do light plumbing, we can do electrical. We can do those things. My wife and I are very good at it. I also have a crafty kid, and she'll help. And that helps a lot too, is if you're going to be flipping, if somebody in the relationship has what they call a good eye, they can look at a room and say, okay, this room would look great in these colors, come up with a palette so that the house matches when you're done. But just being able to paint, do minor repairs, like I said, light plumbing, all those kind of things. If you can do that yourself, you're going to save tens upon tens of thousands of dollars on every flip, and that becomes profit.
Right.
And
That's what gives you the advantage,
that's
right?
a huge
So if you and
advantage.
I are trying to buy the same investment property that's for sale,
Mhm.
and you can do the work yourself and I have to pay a contractor, you're winning that every time because you can pay more for the property up front than I can because I have more back end costs and you have less because you can do the work. But that's what gives you an advantage, Ed. That's cool that you and your wife could and you know family members could do that work.
Yeah.
That's I wish that were our case.
Yeah. So but you can do it the other way with contractors and still be successful. You just really have to be careful, watch what they're doing, make sure that you've got a good contractor. We are blessed. I got a family member that can do tile work and understands, all that kind of plumbing, bathroom, and kitchen stuff. Having somebody in the family that's a bathroom and kitchen person, big deal, big deal,
Absolutely.
big deal. The only thing we ever have to pay anybody to do is roofing.
Mm.
And only because I don't like to go up high. That's just me.
Me either.
And I don't know what I'm doing. So,
Right.
not liking to go up there and also not knowing what I'm doing, and that's a big part of success in life in general is knowing what you don't know. Don't try to be a know-it-all. Understand when it's time to pay somebody to do something.
Amen.
You will save yourself a lot of money not having to pay for it twice when you do look at a project and say, too much for me, gotta call a pro.
And as a real estate agent, you learn quickly who the good flippers are in your area. You
Yes.
walk in and you're like, oh no.
Right. Yeah.
I so and so did this flip, and then there was another gentleman in the area who did flips, and his agent got to the point where he would say in the remarks, "This is a so and so's flip," and you knew it was just done to perfection, and
Yeah.
that's the kind of property I want to have one of my buyers buy for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's an interesting thing that just happened to me over the weekend. So I'm going to date this podcast for a second, but there's a lot of tariffs going on at
Right.
the moment. And the stock market is not particularly doing well. And so I spoke with someone over the weekend who was complaining about the fact that they've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in their retirement fund. They were thinking of retiring shortly. And now, based on today's projection, that doesn't look like a possibility for them. So they're a little shocked and dismayed. And I said, it's the first moment in my life where I am so grateful that all of my assets have a front door.
Right. Right.
Because this stock market does not affect
Yeah.
how much my assets are worth
Right.
because they're property and not stocks.
Right. Very, very rarely do property values go down. They might get stagnant for a while. You might see the selling price come down under the right circumstances, but that's the selling price. That's not the actual. If you bought a house for $150,000 and a year ago they were selling for $300,000, now they're only selling for $275,000. You still made a pile of money if you still own the house. You don't realize the loss or the gain until you actually sell the property. So you have a lot of control over that.
Right.
If the market is flat or not, there's no movement, you just continue renting.
Right.
If the market is gone through the roof and you think it's time to sell, then you can sell and great. You did great. Very, very, very rarely in history have people who are real estate investors woken up and said, "Oh, I had a bad day. Took a loss. You might take a paper loss. That's great
Yes.
for tax reasons. But at the end of the day, real estate is, as my mother said, my grandfather used to say, they're not making more land.
Right.
So I did find out is not true. They are making more land in Hawaii because there's a volcano there, but we won't be able to use that land for quite a while.
Yeah. I think they do that in some Middle Eastern countries as well. They
Yeah.
make some land out in the ocean.
Yeah, they make artificial islands.
Yes.
But the reality of it is they're not making more
Yeah.
land. So land
We
is
digress.
it's finance. Yeah, it's a finite resource.
So what do you think are the most important things? These we're going to be very basic here.
Yeah.
What are the most important things if you are a first-time investor? You're like, okay, I want to do what Ed and Kim have done. I want to go buy some real estate and have it either be a buy and hold or I want to flip it. What's the first or first few things they should know?
Okay. So the first thing you need to know is you're going to try to do something that is daring and risky and
Scary.
scary
I get scared every time I do it still, and I own multiple
and
properties.
may make you a little bit wealthy. So if you talk to all your friends and family about it, they're probably going to talk you out of it. So once you make up your mind that you want to do a thing, forget about the rest of the world and just do it. That's the first thing you need to do is you get a a, a mindset that this is what you're going to do. And it's really not, you need to know it's really not scary and it's really not all that risky either. So as a the first time we did this, we made sure that the property that we bought, even if we didn't rent it, we could afford to pay the mortgage so that we would never get ourselves in a bind if we couldn't get a tenant. So you want to start small and build from there. Get a property, do whatever work you need to do on it, get it done and get it rented as soon as you can. Make sure that you vet your tenants to the best of your ability. If it makes sense to hire a property manager to do that, I would recommend you do that. We never did that. We were our own property managers, but I did have the ability to check people's credit and things like that, which gave me a decided advantage over the average person that's doing this. So you definitely want to, it's very important to get a good tenant. Don't, and once you have a good tenant, you want to keep that good tenant. So don't be crazy with raising your rent every year. If the tenant is paying their rent and you can afford to allow them to stay there, probably it's best to let that sleeping dog lie. And then those are my big pieces of advice. What do you think?
So I think probably the question I had until I did it, the question that kept coming up for me is where am I getting this money? Where am I getting this money? Where am I getting this money?
Yeah.
That was the question.
Yeah.
I didn't personally own a home right away, even of my own, right? And so let me just skip a little bit ahead here. When we did buy our first investment property, by the way, there is an investment property we purchased that was a disaster, and that's a whole podcast for itself some other time. But we will skip that one and move ahead to we didn't allow that to stop us. And when we actually did it the right way, what we did was my husband and I each had a little bit of money, but it still probably wasn't enough. So we found partners that we did it with.
Mhm.
Now, what I would say about that is that everyone that has had a partner will dissuade you around doing it. But what I do and what I like to do in general is I like all my agreements to be upfront and in writing. Even if we're best friends, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Let's just have our agreements in writing. That way, no one's confused about what the other person said. But the other piece is choose somebody who you have a comparable value system with. That's very important.
Yeah.
And then you'll be able to navigate some of the worst of the moments and the best of the moments. And so that is what we did initially. We had partners and we had enough money that we could buy the property and then we could fix it up and then we could get it rented. And we did that without a mortgage. So we did that cash. Now that was back in the day when you could buy a house for $42,000, $52,000.
Yeah.
It used to be a different world in investing. Investing has changed dramatically. I personally feel it's gotten a lot more challenging, partly because everybody and their brother is a flipper now.
Right.
Right.
Well, everybody wants to be either a
Yes.
flipper or a
Yes.
landlord.
And they're
Yeah,
trying,
right,
and that situation creates a ton of people, bidding on one investment property that comes on the market. Now there's 10 investors trying to buy this one property because there's just not that many anymore.
right.
But, as foreclosures go up, those properties become more available.
And abandonments and things like that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So they're out there if you know where to look for them. That's another thing that I really recommend to people, particularly when you're first doing this. You want to own stuff that's near you, that you understand.
Yes.
If you live in a town and you understand how that town is and where the good areas are in town, where the less than good areas are in town, you'll have a good idea of where you can and can't buy and where you can and can't buy something that you can rent. If you don't know, if you're taking the advice of a real estate agent 3 towns over, they may or may not have your best interest at heart. So I really recommend at the not even at always invest in an area that you understand.
Yeah, that was our mistake, right? The first disastrous investment that we did was outside of the state, and that was a mistake. So
Right. Real hard to
agreed.
manage. Right.
You need to know your market.
Yeah.
The bulk of my investment properties are in the town I grew up in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because I know that market. I know
Right.
those houses. Now, our business partners didn't know the town as well as I did, and so what's a preferential street versus this other street? That is just a matter of having grown up there.
Right.
So, in regards to a real estate agent, I would say if you're going to use a real estate agent to buy investment properties, choose a real estate agent that has experience with investors or is an investor themselves. Now, in your mind, you may think, well, now I might be competing against my actual agent. Well, if your agent has a moral compass, you won't be competing against them. But you should choose an agent that understands investing if you're going to choose a real estate agent to buy investment properties.
Yeah, it is a different animal. Primary residence is not the same as investment real estate. It's a
Right.
completely different beast. It walks different, it talks different, it funds different, it lends different. That's another really big thing is you need to develop relationships with lenders. And I caution everybody, I have a lot of folks that come to me for investment lending, and I help them every way that I possibly can. But one of the things that I tell each and every one of them is I would like to be your primary source. That's how I make a living, is lending money. But you need to have more than just me. So you want to have a bank lender, maybe 2 bank lenders that you develop a relationship with, a credit union. Sometimes credit unions are better than banks and the other way around. And then it's always a good idea to get involved with a group of like-minded people that are investing as well. These groups are fairly easy to find, and they will have access or introduce you to what are called private money lenders. And private money lenders are a great way to get money to purchase something quickly that you're going to refinance through a regular lender later. They'll charge a higher interest rate. They might charge a fee for the use of the money, but they will allow you to move fast. And in investment real estate, speed is a big factor, being able to move fast.
Absolutely.
Also, if you have equity in your home, you can leverage that. Talk to your bank about getting a home equity line of credit and how a home equity, we'll do a whole episode on how a home equity line of credit works and why it's your best friend.
Right. This is the origin podcast, right? Is using your home to start to build your wealth, right?
Exactly.
And that usually begins with a line of credit.
Right. That's your best asset. So you want to use that,
Right.
as to the best of its ability.
So from a fix and flip perspective, which you have done,
Mm-hmm.
that nets you a big pile of money versus the consistent smaller amount of money every single month in a buy and hold. So what did you ever do a fix and flip and then use it to buy another property?
Well, so that's exactly what you do. So you like I said earlier, you start out small. You're going to buy a home that requires a lot of cosmetic stuff that's not too hard. It might not be the the greatest house in the world. You know, you're not looking for something that you're going to fall in love with. You're looking for something that you can make nice that hopefully somebody else will fall in love with. That's a big problem that people have is they buy the house, they do all the work, and in their head it's worth $1 million and it's still only worth $200,000. You need to keep it under control, keep it under wraps, have open eyes while you're doing it. Get that house set up. You flip it. If the first time you make $20,000, that's excellent. You're going to take that $20,000, you're going to put it aside right away. You're going to pay off the other money that you got from the sale of it. You're going to pay off any mortgage you might have had on that house, any line of credit you might have used, credit cards that you might have used to buy things at Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever to make this all happen. Whatever's left over is your leftover. Let's say it's $20,000. Don't buy a car. Don't go on vacation. Don't do the dumb things.
Yeah.
Do the smart thing. Look for another house. Now you've got $20,000 of your own money that you can put into it. Hopefully you're going to follow that process. Now this time you're going to get back the 20 plus another 20 or 30 or whatever. Now you've got, say, $50,000. And you just keep repeating that process until now you've got this pile of money. You don't need to borrow money anymore.
Right.
That's the best way to do it, is do it with your own money. And then you just continue that process. You're just going to continue that process. Maybe you'll get to the point where you have 3 houses that you're working on at one time while you've got 3 houses on the market. That's a great place to be. That's a great place to be. And then you wake up one day and you say, real estate's never going to get better than it is today. And you sell everything. And then COVID happens and everything quadruples. And you're like, oh, wow, I got out too quick. And everybody should have that problem.
Mm-hmm.
It was it's a great problem. Oh, well, we only made this much.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think finding the money is the first hurdle people struggle to get over, and they think to themselves, where am I ever going to get that much money? I'm going to tell you that when we started, it was with a very small amount of money. Like, I think I had the very first property we bought was actually the vacation property we bought in Ocean City, Maryland. And we just had to come up with the 25% down, because it was a second home. You could only get 75. And so we only needed 12.5% of that because we bought it with our business partners.
Right.
And then Craig and I split that amount. So I needed to come up with, 6.25%.
Yeah.
So we had enough to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And, same thing. We sold that in 2020. So, we made a little bit of money on that property. We had it for 5 years. And that was great. That was kind of a fix and flip. It was a buy and hold. We held it. We did rent it.
Yeah.
So I do have experience also with a vacation rental, which was an interesting experience because that's a weekly rental instead of monthly. And it's, 10 times the amount of work for sure. And also it was 3.5 hours from my house. Very difficult to manage on your own. You should really have a property manager if you choose to do something that's so far away. But yeah, so getting over the hurdle of the money, you have to be creative in the beginning sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. You just got to get yourself started. And then after you have your first success, you feel like, oh, I can do this.
Right.
And then you want to do another one.
Right.
Yeah.
But just like everything else, though, it requires discipline and planning.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be thoughtful about what you're doing. Make sure that you're doing this with the right people.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you understand what you're doing. And then, like the sneaker people say, just do it.
Yeah. Yeah, you do have to just do it. And there is an enormous amount that goes into actually doing it that we aren't touching on. And we'll come back again. I know that we say this in a lot of podcasts, but we'll talk about, in more detail. We'll do okay, we're going to go buy an investment property. We can walk people through the steps of that. What would we do? I mean, we can do a mock-up one where you and I do it at, okay, how much money can you bring? How much money can you bring? Okay, this is how much we have, where we want to buy it, and we don't need to say a town or anything, but we can say, well, we want it to be in this kind of a neighborhood, or we want a school to be close by, or all of these things. And so we'll do that where we get into much greater detail about how we would walk through the process. Does that sound cool?
Absolutely. I think what we'll do is this will be the next 3 podcasts. First one we're going to talk about is how you get to the money that's in your house so that you can put it to work for you.
Perfect.
And then the next one will be about how to buy a rental property. And then the one after that will be how to flip a house.
Perfect.
You have been listening to Brick by Brick. Be sure and subscribe, post questions for future episodes, or comment. This is a Super Squirrel production, Super Squirrel Studios, Stony Creek Mills, Pennsylvania.